from 2015. Free speech is good. It allows one to humble the hubris of fools, and there's been much hubris coming from a site called Australia Remember Your History, which isn't to say the authors aren't sincere people saying what they have heard everyone else say, but a highly repeated meme that is distant from truth and highly damaging to cultural assets must be addressed without holding back. And this is not a fierce battle of wits. The authors of that site have little idea of what they have written. Nobody is 200 years old, and if they were, they probably would not care too much now how the nation was run. We are defined and informed by decisions made by our ancestors and their community, but we are not condemned by those decisions. It is incumbent upon us to work and build a world that will be inhabited by our children and those not yet born. It is a sacred trust. A similar trust had the greatest generation fight tooth and nail in World War II against oppressors who sought to control the world. They weren't responsible for the war, but they had to fight it, and neither were the diggers of World War I responsible for World War II, although it is true that the xenophobia of Australian ALP Prime Minister who denied Japan ambition as yellow peril wrought a monster. We can make good or bad decisions, but the decisions are ours to make in sacred trust for those who will come. The Hume Highway is not owned by Hume. Bankstown is not owned by Joseph Banks. Cooktown is not owned by Captain Cook, and Nelson's Bay does not belong to Horatio Nelson, but each deserves the honor given them for what they did in service. Arthur Phillip was the first governor of New South Wales and acted as governor for the penal colony. That was early Sydney. There are those who characterize the early colony as an invasion, but it was a penal colony that had been set up after US rebelled and UK needed a place to send their convicts. There was no European government in Australia, so they didn't see the need to make a European negotiation. The colony had room to expand and resources to bloom. Some early convicts fled the colony, determined to walk north to China. Hope springs eternal. There were no developed areas Europeans expected. Flies from the Second Fleet on settled in Australia and became blowflies. Before the flies, the cowpats weren't biodegradable. Surveyor James Meehan developed a theory regarding why there were no local Aboriginal tribes in the Campbelltown, Liverpool area related to Aboriginal hunter-gatherer lifestyles. Meehan could see where they had been recent inhabitants, and so he felt that it must have been the colony which somehow pushed the tribes away. Australia had large animals like kangaroo. To hunt a kangaroo, the Aborigines would wound it and chase it down for a few days, tracking it and kill it. The chickens brought in by the colonists were not bad either, but hunting techniques don't translate to bulls. No sensible person wounds a bull expecting it to run away to be chased down. Europeans had learned to herd cattle and lead them to slaughterhouses, not to fight them. The land the Aborigines had left was considered bad land because of the imports. Aborigines were migratory, but they failed to return for a few years to those areas. Everywhere in the world, close proximity of diverse families requires police. Sydney Colony needed police too, and there were murders and misunderstandings between Aborigines and colonists. European diseases spread through Aboriginal communities, decimating them all around Australia. Some early settlers made it their job to care for the sick in Aboriginal communities. Some churches set up with welfare responsibilities began converting Aborigines. There's a huge disconnect in the invasion lobby who characterize Australia as having been founded through invasion. They claim that terra nullius was a false premise and that Aboriginal people had been cheated of substantial wealth. They claim the colonists deliberately gave diseased rags to spread infection, and then churches conspired to steal children as a genocide, and then that lobby point to terrible conditions for some Aborigines today, and then they try to prevent the communities from being helped, but insist they have autonomous government, which further isolates the communities. Some who have little or no connection to ancient tribes siphon funds from those that do, as if defining people by race would address inequity, when it had not in Nazi Germany or in South Africa. The way forward is not through division and blame. Aboriginal peoples don't need to become European, but they need the dignity of real work, real education, to be able to participate with the real community that is part of Australia. Those lying about history, denigrating those who work to save people in need, advocating for apartheid and despising cultural assets have a lot to answer for, because their lies continue to harm those that they claim to act for. Now we see children denied much because of their race. The invasion of European culture which harms Aboriginal peoples is not English government, but French revolutionary-style, socialist-loving practices which command the press and ignore reality.